Per usual, everything on this channel for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It's Teaching Tech Tuesday on this rainy afternoon. Let's take a look at life after the edge to edge. What do you do after a lot of these trades have successfully completed? Do you close everything? Do you reopen? Where do you reopen? When do you reopen? This is all very subjective and very dependent on the chart, the person, what you're trading. Are you trading leverage? Are you trading low time frames, high time frames? I don't have any great answers, catch-alls for everything, but just to review the stuff that I like. For trend, cloud obviously is number one. Lately, it's been all about these edge-to-edge moves, and these tend to work out best when you have a flat Kumo, a flat cloud. We'll take a look at that. Past the edge-to-edge is a full-blown trend. So this process gives you a trade setup pre-trend. From here on out, it's usually best to deploy the trend strategy, which would be with the cloud. So what I would want to see is the full cloud package here. I don't care about lagging span personally, but some people do. You want price above cloud, bullish ticket, cross bullish cloud. Whether or not this edge-to-edge completes successfully and pulls you out of a trade, again, is highly dependent on what you're looking at. If I'm looking at Pepe or something with a massive cloud here on Kraken Pro, it's kind of a probability game. Do we expect the cloud trade to work out? Yes, I do. Now it did, right? That's why I took the trade. But now what do you do? So for me, I've closed all of the Pepe positioning that I was involved with. I don't personally want to touch this thing until the cloud has fully flipped bullish. Price has probably reconsolidated a bit. RSI is at 87.90. It's probably going to get a bear div on any higher high. It probably at some point reaches for a fib measurement of the pattern. Almost always these edge-to-edge moves will have a pattern, and almost always the Kumo breakouts will have a pattern. That pattern in both cases has been an inverted head and shoulders. There is no single pattern that has made me more money than that one, and it's not close. So whenever I see anything that looks like that, I tend to pay attention. So the difference between now and October, November 24 is that was just a vanilla trend breakout. This going forward is actually harder to manage because at this point, if you've successfully traded a 2x on Pepe, the question I have for you is, okay, what more do you want out of this trade setup, out of this trade idea? Is it more probable that it just keeps going, or is it more probable that it reconsolidates? I think a good general rule is the thicker the cloud, the higher the risk reward, right? Down here, we were talking about stop losses at the cloud, the key gem. And if we happen to hit that target, I'm happy with it personally. So that might not be everybody, but for me, if we hit that target, I don't really care what happens after that for a good long while. And that may be weeks to months. This could take some time to reconsolidate. So from here on out, this chart is just dead to me. It just doesn't matter. I can't do anything with this. There's no additional setups. Now you can always hold throughout, just keep holding, but that's really, again, a personal preference, personal bias. Do I want to hold Pepe beyond 2 days? I don't. For Sol, would you want to hold this beyond 195? Probably. You'd probably want to hold majors a little bit longer. Now I think Sol, again, has a ways to go on the move still, and is more likely in my mind to continue at that level. This sounds wishy-washy because it is. It's highly subjective. There's no one answer. But again, what I would say is if you had a massive win with a flat cloud, with a huge cloud, you take that, especially if it's on leverage, if it's high beta, if it's alts. If it's just a trade, I take the trade and generally forget about the chart for a good long while. If it's a longer term idea or an investment, then at the very least you caught the move where you'd expect to catch it. Another example of this is Bitcoin on the weekly. We caught the move down here and it consolidated for a while, right? It did not continue after hitting that level. That is generally what you're going to see. You're generally not going to see what we're seeing on Bitcoin daily, which is just straight continuation. That is not something that I've seen most of the time, both on the way up and on the way down. You'll notice on the way down, we hit the edge to edge, right? To me, this is the high conviction, high sizing, high leverage setup that you never want to miss. If there's a thick cloud and we are approaching above or below, you want to pay attention to that. That's the highest conviction. Past that, it just depends on what happens, right? So we're kind of in the similar phase to March, April. It just depends what happens up here. We don't have a bear div yet. Could this keep going? Absolutely. And I'm willing to just hold on because I could care less. It's Bitcoin. It's going to do Bitcoin things, right? But for some of the alts, in my mind, I'd rather not hold on. That's just me. Some people would want to do the opposite. The other thing about this particular setup for Bitcoin, the cloud wasn't really that thick. It really didn't give you great entries. But at this point, the cloud is fully bullish. One worrisome sign I have here with BTC specifically is we are starting to set up this TKC clamp situation where if we continue to go sideways and don't break out, you're going to see a similar setup to this where it's a good idea to use the Tenkin as a trailing stop loss. ETH is another one. Would you expect this to continue beyond this point? It looks like it wants to. It looks like it has no signs of slowing down. What's the setup here? Where's the entry? How do you best trade this on the daily using the cloud? I think that's very tough at this point. That's why this entry back here, anytime you see anything like this, right, that to me is bullish continuation. This right now is you picked a turn and it's still making a decision on whether or not you're going to see bullish continuation. In my mind, that usually takes longer than, okay, we're just going to go straight up. Now there's always edge cases, right? But that's why I would take trades like this, if you're in them, and just take the win and be done with it. Or take a partial win and be done with it and hold the rest, right? But I don't think there's one answer. That's always going to be the case every time. Another great example, Bitcoin Weekly in 2016. It made this edge-to-edge move and it just never stopped, right? It never stopped at all and just kept making higher highs. The same can be said in 2019 and 2020. So it's really asset dependent and it really depends on the broader market conditions, which no one's going to like that answer, but it's the truth. So right now we're back into just vanilla cloud checklist territory. If at any point on any given day, any asset is displaying a breakout with a TK cross and a bullish cloud, I go long that day. I don't think about it. Full long that day. I don't think about it. Now, it's going to depend on how far away you are from the Kijun and mean reversion potential, but these signals and settings are slow on purpose. So when you see them, it should be rare. And for me, I know what to do. I don't think about it. Beyond this, the next step would be Kijun bounce. That's going to be like a June-July conversation for BTC. I talked about the TKC clamp, but those are the next two things. And we sort of oscillate between all this stuff collectively. We're either trending bullish or bearish, or we are trying to reverse bullish or bearish in neutral territory, or we are overbought, oversold, and we are signaling an intra-trend mean reversion. And you can just go back to the stuff you like to use in a vanilla bull trend for targets. We talk about chart patterns on this channel all the time, talk about fib extensions all the time, talk about Williams fractals, trailing stop losses all the time. We're not really in Bollinger Band season. I like RSI because it gives you a read on divergences. I like pivot points because it gives you a high time frame level to watch. And now we're just back into trending season. We're not back into trying to figure out the bottom. If you remember, I've said for a long time, I would much rather wait for the price to be in the cloud on the daily than to think about anything on the downtrend. To me, it's just not worth it, because when you get trades like this, you tend to get them in clusters because there's so many coins. And then there's literally too many options to choose from as far as trade setups are concerned. Another question people ask me about edge-to-edge stuff is like, if I missed the trade, what do I do today? What do I do as a fresh entry? And the rules are always the same. My preference is to look for stuff that's at the bottom of the cloud that has not made its way through the cloud. Now, I personally like Sol 195 plus with high conviction, but someone else might not. Someone else might prefer a different looking chart. If we go to ENA is probably my preferred chart right now. This thing has been in a downtrend for a long time. Here's your chart pattern. Here's your cloud entry. And that's the trade. That's the setup. Hopefully, if you're following me at all, not that you should, but if you're trading the cloud, you've taken 10 of these setups in the past 4 weeks. And it's just like, okay, you know what to do. It's not a secret. You get long, stay long, keep adding until we get to the point where we are closer to the payoff. The risk reward just doesn't make sense. the risk reward down here, even today, if the stop loss is the Kijun or the cloud, your choice, any new low or low, even today, the risk reward is still 4 on this. If we compare that to, I don't know, what's another one that hasn't broken out or near broken? Popcat. Okay. Popcat, I think, has hit its level. Yeah. Okay. Like, is there anything left in the tank here today? No. Does that mean it won't keep going? Also, no. Does that mean you can't, on trend, open a trade here within the next week or two, even within the month of May? I mean, there's probably a trade setup that's coming here. It's just that at this point, a lot of these charts have 2x, right? So yes, this stuff can keep going, but usually when you hit the 50% level, that's the high conviction, high trade, high leverage, whatever setup. And beyond this is just a bonus in the moment. Usually it takes some time to consolidate and go again and fully maintain that bullishness on trend. So if cloud is thin, just to review, cloud is thin and it's just a breakout, and that's just a vanilla trend. And this is along all day. Now this also, you'll notice, most of the time, Kumo breakouts, edge-to-edge trades, most of the time they will have a pattern associated with them. One of the reasons I like patterns along with the cloud is they do typically speak to each other, but this was just a trend. There was no expected move necessarily based on the cloud. It was just a vanilla breakout. Down here, I'd say, yeah, this is more of like an edge-to-edge, 50% mean reversion. You know, maybe you like SWE and it's just going to keep going, fine. But if we're talking about fresh positions up here relative to any point below $3, it makes less sense to me in the moment. And it needs a little more time, I think. That's why you want to stock this stuff before all these trades happen, because you can see it coming. So it's up to you and what exactly to do next here. But should the cloud flip bullish, there's no reason to do anything. You're now entering a bull trend after picking the bottom. Congratulations. It's just in my experience, most of the time it's going to take some consolidation before continuation. I think Rivian, I keep talking about this, watch this thing just fail hilariously, but this is another good example on a high time frame. There haven't really been edge-to-edge moves. This is just a giant wedge. So would I want to close this at 16? No, I want to see this actually trend bullish, right? So I'm willing to cheat the cloud entry because it's been bearish for so long. And that was really the justification for a lot of these alts. They were down so much for an extended period of time in altcoin land, that's months instead of years in legacy land, that it made sense to take those trades. And I think it makes sense for stuff like this on Rivian. 50% of this move, this down move, is like, I don't know, 30, whatever, right? That's a 2x. Is that going to happen tomorrow? No, but this would just be a vanilla cloud breakout. Another one that a lot of people caught was Coin. Talked about it for a few days. I really liked the chart pattern. And oddly, if you just trade legacy, you do have to cheat the patterns and the breakouts a little bit, because you get these days where, okay, it's just up 40% or whatever it is. Obviously, you had some fundamental news with the S&P inclusion, but the last breakout was the same way. The last breakout was a gap and go, and it never looked back. So you can't always wait for the perfect entry. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good enough. That's why I like to add to this stuff, nibble, 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 and then ideally you get a decent entry on breakout. This was just, you know, the way it went, right? You really had no time for that. Just like all the charts we were just talking about, to me, this was more of a vanilla cloud breakout in November and not an edge-to-edge move with a pattern, with a measured move. Whereas this looked more like an edge-to-edge move. Now, this has already happened. Okay, fine. What do you do here? Me personally, I closed my leveraged coin. I got most of the move. It happened in one day. And now I can deploy capital elsewhere, whatever. Looking at coin based on the pattern, this does have a little bit left to run. Does it make sense to open a fresh position here today? No, it doesn't. Not to me, not on technicals. You can think about the S&P inclusion. You could say it's going to go up another 10,000%. But this is another way to think about these edge-to-edge moves, especially with chart patterns. You know, does it make sense today versus 2 days ago, 3 days ago, when we're sort of in the chop, forming the right shoulder? Made a lot more sense back then. Whereas here, there's still a decent upside, don't get me wrong, but I think the risk reward here isn't as bullish as it was a couple days ago. Now, that may not matter if this has a mega bull trend continuation. Now, that didn't happen in December, right? just like most alts. Most alts broke out in November, broke down in January. So maybe if you're more bullish total 2 this time, you like holding on to something like this over an extended period of time. That's up to you. For me, I'd rather take the quick win, rotate into something else that looks like it has potential for a similar breakout, not necessarily in a day, but I like to keep rotating and taking these trades, assuming there are more trades to take. And the last thing I'll talk about, just because it's the cloud and leveraged con L, this looks like, so this is leverage coin, 2x coin. It looks like it still has room to go, room to run on the cloud, this cloud. It very well could, it's also the wrong cloud, but whatever. It very well could keep going. What I like to do, I'd rather look at the unleveraged version of any of the charts, take the trades there. And then if I want to use leverage, I'll just use the leveraged instrument. You can chart the leveraged instruments. The setups may look wonky. The clouds may look wonky. Again, it's very possible that this works out anyway. I just don't have a lot of experience trading like MSTR versus MSTU. Same deal. It looks like there's a massive cloud left on MSTU, and that could happen eventually. It's just if you've completed the edge to edge on the unlevered version, to me, that's good enough. Maybe you close some of it instead of all of it. That's up to you. But this is, again, highly subjective, very dependent on what you're trading, what your timeframes are. But the good news is we're back to vanilla trend stuff at this point. This is just basic cloud 101 going forward into the later stages of Q2. If you haven't done so, do yourself a favor and hook yourself up with a Kraken Pro account using the link in the description of this video. That's all I have for this one today. Give me a like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you want me to talk about on any future Teaching Tech Tuesday videos. And happy trading.